Hey everybody, it's 7 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, so you know what time it is. It's time for your weekly episode of SCV Chat. I'm your host for evening, Moose, and I'm joined by Connor. Connor, you look different.
Yeah, hey, Moose.
That's perfect. You know what? I wouldn't be mad if you used that voice the whole show, but as you can see, I'm joined by past Commander-in-Chief Chuck McMichael.
Well, I can't be Connor because I quit dipping.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's never too late to pick up a horrible habit. But I am grateful that Chuck was able to come on with it being the week it was. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a bit of a break. I'm going to relax for a minute. And then as soon as I relax, the show's schedule just goes out the window. And so Chuck was nice enough to come on and talk about a very important topic, and we'll get to that in a second. If you're one of the people that watch on our website, it was down. It's fixed now, so you can watch this episode. It got fixed as we were going live and while we're a bit late. And while Kentucky Division Commander Kyle Thompson is on time is because we were running late. You know, Kyle is only on the show if we run the show a bit late. So I always tell everybody we do it for Kyle. And as you can tell, I'm not in my normal setup tonight, if you can call where I normally host the show from a setup. But I am also on the road, so that added complexity to tonight's show. So if you could guys help me out, I did not get to promote the episode like normal, so please share it out. because tonight we're talking about something very important. In today's modern academia, historians have almost been on a mission to destroy a certain part of Confederate heritage. Now, they're always trying to destroy Confederate history and heritage. That's become their favorite hobby and pastime. Some have actually even made a career out of it in the college historian world. But tonight we're talking about some forgotten heroes, some forgotten veterans, and that is the African American Confederate soldier. And of course, February is Black History Month. So I have been wanting to do an episode like this again for a while. It's been a while since we talked about our African American veterans that we have here in the South. And luckily, Chuck McMichael, who wanted me to tell everybody he is an expert on all things Confederate history. And I'm just throwing Chuck under the bus right now.
Yeah.
But he expects it. I think it makes him smile, hopefully. If not,
well, the fact that Moose promised to pay me $125 to do the show.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah,
SCB Chat is rolling in money. We just make millions upon millions, don't you know? But all jokes aside, Chuck was nice enough to come on here, and he's got some veterans that he knows the story about that we're getting to share tonight. And we're going to wait a bit longer to let everybody get on so we can start the episode. And so Chuck isn't having to worry about filling a whole hour of programming by himself. He might get some help from me. Oh, no, we're going 2 hours tonight, Chuck. Didn't I tell you that?
We're not going. You may go 2 hours, but I'm not.
Well, for those who don't know, some of my favorite episodes are when Chuck's on, because Chuck is easy to work with, and he makes you laugh so much that you lose track of the hour. So again, always good to have past Commander in Chief Chuck McMichael on, and seeing that
you're in-laws too.
Who'd you say?
You're an in-law.
Yeah, we're in-laws.
My wife or cousins. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, Chuck's family. So I kind of blackmailed him into this, is what he's trying to tell everybody. I didn't really give him much of a choice. I told him he wouldn't get my Christmas cards anymore. And Chuck was like, well, fine. If you're going to blackmail me, I guess I'll be on. But
I've always been so shy about speaking up.
Yeah. Chuck is the definition of shy, so he really doesn't like being on. But he does have a supportive member, another guest on the show, if you will, that might help him through these struggling times.
Well, it does help that I am an educator.
Chuck is an educator. It's why he always gives great talks, and why I kind of force him to get on the show on occasion. Everybody that gets on the show, here's a secret. I have blackmail on everybody. That's why we have so many guests. But we do have another guest if you want to show him off, or is he shy?
Well, no. Oh, please. Okay, Hank is in the house. So y'all can say, hey, hail Hank here.
All hail Hank.
Yes, he survived the holidays. And I wondered where he was yesterday. And he was actually watching the Possum Bowl while that other game was on.
Yeah, we've put Hank in charge of our halftime show. So the Pop Top break tonight.
That would be quite the marsupial extravaganza.
So the Pop Top break tonight is sponsored by Hank. He will be singing and narrating for everybody. So to give me and Chuck a bit of rest. Yeah, no, that Super Bowl was, oh gosh. That was I caught the tail end of it myself. I enjoyed my Super Bowl, the thing I look forward to all year, the Dixie National Rodeo. That's what I was doing yesterday instead of preparing for this show. I decided that I was going to go enjoy a rodeo, and then today, simply because I couldn't get off track enough, I decided to go by archives and history and go through some documents pertaining to a
Well, it's
special
right there
project.
near the Coliseum thing.
It was tempting me. And
Yeah.
you have me and Dad together, two historians that love archiving and collecting data. That I guarantee you, when we hand it over, people are going to be like,
I'm surprised it was
"Thanks."
open on a Sunday.
Oh no, we went today.
Oh, today.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why the show was also on track. I didn't realize that I had to plan for the show. I was just going to show up, but GCB texted me, said he had work tonight, and I was like, "Oh, I got to come up with the show." I have been in the archives all day, and this morning I had a meeting for the Mississippi Division. Hopefully, a special project we can share soon. But I looked up and I was like, "Oh crap, it's 5." So again, Chuck is my savior. When you hear the song "There Goes My Hero," just imagine Chuck McMichael coming in to save
Well,
me.
yeah. I mean, behind the scenes, I get a text at 6 o'clock saying, "Can you be on the show tonight?"
Chuck really got the crap end of the stick, so everybody give Chuck a crap,
So,
applaud.
I mean, there went my plans to watch Rocky 12 tonight. Okay.
Yeah.
Rocky versus Godzilla, whatever the heck they ended up with.
Oh,
Yeah.
who knows? But yeah, poor Chuck. Let's all just thank Chuck for coming on. But real quick, because I don't think I said it, and Connor is not going to let me live it down. The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast, not necessarily the views and opinions of the SCV, GEC, nor Divisions, Brigade, camps, or any other subsidiaries, strictly those who are expressing them. So I got that out of the way so I don't get in any trouble. So without further ado, I think we have a good crowd now. And I hope that y'all are sharing the groups because this is going to be a big episode. And this episode usually is a big one. So let's dive into, again, the forgotten heroes of the war between the states, the ones that not necessarily are being forgotten, more of erased from history by academic historians in a real sad play to just try to paint, again, our heroes as bad as possible. And then just completely denying that there were even some of these other veterans in the war, again, like the African American veterans, who they will look you in the eye and say there is no such thing.
You ready for me?
Yeah, you go ahead,
Okay, well,
Chuck.
let's start off with a few parameters before I get into different examples and stories. Like I said, I'm not an expert on this, but I've been around for a while. So, like Paul Graham always say, based on the commercial, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. So you just if you're involved and you pay attention, you pick up stuff along the way. So the first thing I want to get into is this whole deal about where they're erasing or shunning the service of these black Southerners. I wouldn't even call them African Americans, as black Southerners, or really they're just Southerners.
Amen.
One of the things that people forget, I taught social studies in high school, so we would get into this stuff sometimes. And the first point I would make is the closeness of black and white people traditionally in Southern culture. You'll hear people on TV talk about soul food. Well, I would say there's really no such thing as soul food. There's Southern food. And when you had the migration of blacks to your factory jobs up north during the Depression, the Yankees had never seen Southern food, so they just assumed it was only black food. But in reality, we all grew up with cornbread and collard greens and black eyed peas and all that kind of stuff. So it's really just Southern food. And I used to tell them black and white folks in the South culturally have much more in common than we do with any black or white folks up north. We're much closer culturally and even in personal relationships than black and whites up north. I know the black folks I grew up with, went to school with, and everything. We have a lot more to hang out with than I would some white guy from the Bronx. We have the shared history of our peoples, and we have the shared geography and the shared family connection. So remember that when we're talking about Black Confederates and why they did exist, because they were part of the South and part of the Southern culture, whatever their station in life may have been. You had a lot of white folks that didn't have such a hot station in life either. And that was like the next point that I was going to make here with relation to that. One of the first things that a person will say to you when we start talking about Black Confederates is they'll say, well, they were forced to serve. And my answer is, and how many white folks were drafted and forced to serve? How many soldiers in Vietnam, all of them that went, were drafted and forced to serve? Does that negate the honor of their service or that they served at all? No. The fact that they were forced or drafted or volunteered, as long as they served and did their duty, that's what really counts. And the other thing is about where they were forced to be there, how many times do you think out in the field that any of them could have slipped away that wanted to? Heck, how many white soldiers went AWOL and didn't come back? So the ones that stayed with their troops throughout the war, it was because they wanted to. And I'll talk about that in one of these I'll be talking about in a minute. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of these in maybe a little chronological order. The first one that we always hear about right at the beginning of the war was a group called the Native Guards. They were 3 men of color, and they had a French term for that too. I forget what it is now. In New Orleans, who made up 2 companies and drilled. And then before secession, Louisiana seceded, but before they formed the Confederacy, they were in the parades with the other Louisiana troops through the streets of New Orleans, completely black units there. And eventually, of course, they weren't taken into Confederate service at that time, and they dispersed. Now, here's where the big lie comes in. You'll hear Yankees say, well, they went and joined the Union Army then, and you have the Native Guards that are Union. That's not so. They took the name Union Guards, but the majority of the blacks from New Orleans who had been in the Confederate Native Guards just attached themselves to regular Confederate units. It was another group, mostly, of people that were in the Union outfit calling itself the Native Guards. It was not the same soldiers. They weren't just looking to join wherever they could. Like I said, they ended up going off, and New Orleans fell so quick that also kind of put an end to them being one of the home guard units and stuff. And I'm sure there are examples of that sort of thing throughout the South. I would imagine Charleston probably had some free black men that had volunteered to serve in different cities like that as well. And, and that just goes along with, you had, especially in a place like South Louisiana, you had regiments that were made of Spanish immigrants. You had some that were all German. Y'all might, if you look on a map just above New Orleans, there's a place called Lac de la Mine, which means Lake of the Germans. So New Orleans was a big settlement for international immigration in the antebellum period. You had, of course, the Irish were big out of New Orleans, and the Spaniards and all. So, gosh, you want to talk about a multicultural army, just the units from Louisiana. Then you can get into Texas with the Hispanic troops and Native Americans. I mean, North Carolina, Thomas's Legion was mostly a lot of Cherokee troops from North Carolina. Are you ever heard of it, Thomas's Legion?
I've
Maybe
heard of
somebody from North Carolina will do that. Paul, like I said, this is not new stuff that we're talking about here. It's been around for a while if you've paid attention about all the multiculturalness of it. Frederick Douglass, probably the most famous of the abolitionists in the North prior to and during the war, met with Lincoln one time, and Lincoln told him basically, when the war's over, your people are going to have to go. We can't live together. Well, that ensued. Of course, Douglas told him, he said, look, before they started using Union colored troops, was what they called them in the Union Army, you had, they were saying, why don't we use them? And Frederick Douglass was saying, look, there's whole groups of Southern Confederates. I've seen them looking across the field. Why don't we have them? And in fact, there was an article in Harper's Weekly talking about all the black Confederates with rifles under arms. And then that comes back to the, we made them do that. You don't make a man with a rifle do anything. And all kind of Yankee memoirs after the war talk about seeing the picket officers and the picket guard being black troops and all. Well, Jason, the Washington Artillery had some, but they weren't predominantly black. They were mostly, a lot of the Washington Artillery was some of your upper class. Well, the 1st through 4th, yeah. Then the 5th, of course, was the one that went to the Army of Tennessee. But the Washington Artillery went way back, like War of 1812. And they still exist, as a matter of fact, as a separate like guard unit. But they would have had some there too. In fact, if you look at the movie Glory, and at the end where the 54th Massachusetts made up that big charge at Fort Wagner, what they don't show you is that one of the main batteries at Fort Wagner, the Confederate batteries, was mostly manned by black Confederates that were shooting at the 54th Massachusetts. That usually doesn't get mentioned either. So, there's all those examples. There's Tennessee even later did a pension for these black servants, slaves, cooks. That's another one. You might want to slow me down, or we're going to have a really short show here.
Well, we're about to take a commercial break to
do it
space
now,
out.
then, and then remind me to talk about cooks afterwards.
All right, so we are going to take a quick Pop-Tart break, everybody. Let me get our sponsor ready real quick. Of course, tonight's episode is sponsored by Hank, but it is also sponsored by scvchat.com. If you want some Heritage breaking news, SCV breaking news, SCV chat breaking news, live episodes, T-shirts that go to supporting the cause while making you look awesome, with a lot of great Southern Heritage T-shirts, as well as a percentage that goes to the museum, and just so many great things on the website. Please check out scvchat.com. Of course, you have some of our favorite episodes archived on there. And, of course, you can watch the most recent episode of SCV Chat. And there's a section for Commander's Comments. And when reunion time comes, there's a section on updates coming from reunion. But, of course, we're also sponsored by our Patreon. For just $10 a month, you get to completely support SCV Chat. Make sure we stay on the air. Make sure we can keep getting the message out there and keep reclaiming the narrative 1 week at a time, as well as give us some money for some groundbreaking projects that hopefully we have one in production this year. It's looking like we're going to be able to get it done. So please, again, you get exclusive content. You get your name scrolling at the end of the episode, which I know this episode, I think someone mentioned that their name is misspelled. I will be fixing that. It's just I was traveling this week. But you get your name on it at the end of every SCV Chat produced episode. You get an after show on some of our more special episodes that we have something to say still afterwards. You get an exclusive show that you can only watch on Patreon, the Moosehead Book Club, and so much more content. Again, for just $10 a month, you can support the show. So please go check us out on there, and we'll be right back after this Pop-Tart break.
I got into the SCV after receiving an award back when I was in high school. I had no clue what the SCV was. All I knew was that it was a rebel flag and it was supposed to be racist. I decided I would go and look further into it. Everything that we're taught from a very young age is that the Confederacy was wrong. They were treasonous. But it turns out it wasn't just because the South had slaves. This was because of a very fundamental principle of big government. There's nothing more American than keeping the government in line. It's what we were bred to do. It comes down from 1776, Declaration of Independence. It's because we decided to keep a government that we've deemed tyrannical in line. That's what the true definition of the cause is. Me being a young Black American and being a part of the Sons of Confederate Veterans is a shock to a lot of people. The Black Confederate soldier would have had to have been one of the hardest working soldiers there was. These are men who decided to take up a cause because in the end, it was their own cause. In fact, most owners wanted the slaves to stay back because that was how they were steadily making income. They made a choice to do something that was bigger than themselves. And that's why, as a Black Confederate now, it is my duty that I owe them to do something greater than myself. Confederate history is American history, and you cannot separate the two. I am Sammy Travis, descendant of Private Benjamin Rowe, a Confederate veteran.
Always love that one and try to play it around this time of year. And of course, I sprinkle it in every other time of the year just because it's just a fantastic.
For y'all that don't know Sammy, I and several people in the chat here know Sammy fairly well. He belongs to a camp over in Monroe, Louisiana, and lives in College Station now and is at Texas A&M. I think he's been married about a year now. Just a really fine young man. Have you ever met Sammy?
I've had him on the show once, and I've talked to him a bit. Message back and forth, mainly about farming than anything. He wants to be a farmer and get a lot of land, and of course, him being a Texan at heart is a big farm. Look. I told him, I was like, I think he's a Texan at heart. I know you Louisiana boys might claim him. But me and him had a long talk about Texas culture.
Whatever he wants to be.
I told him he can go back and forth between Louisiana because y'all have an awesome culture too. Hopefully I'll be that way sometime soon so I can experience some of that culture again and of course see my family.
Yep. Okay. So what I brought up, and I see that Ron mentioned something like this in the comments as well about, cooks and this and that and the other stuff. Yeah. Say, they were digging ditches and making fortifications. I believe that's called the Army Corps of Engineers now. And in the Navy, it's called the Seabees. And, that's a service just like any other. Probably the most important person in an Army unit is a cook. Napoleon, Army travels on his stomach. So that doesn't mean that their service is any less than anybody else's. You've got to have logistics and backup in order to do the actual front lines. Like Ron was mentioned, 18-1 in World War II. And I'm sure that's been true of every war. In fact, a lot of times during the trench warfare, they would have only one guy that's shooting, and 2 or 3 guys were loading rifles and passing them back and forth to him while that one guy shot, and that way they could keep up the rate of fire. Well, were they not serving just as well as the guy that was actually pulling the trigger? So I wouldn't denigrate anybody serving. They go, oh, well, this guy was just a cook. And I'll look at him and say, so what you're saying is you want to strip this man of the honor that he earned on the battlefield just because he was black? No. So they usually don't have an answer for that. So there you go. So all these things, and that kind of gets to a story that happened in Mobile after the Red River campaign when Richard Taylor was over East Mississippi and Alabama. He had a lot of blacks, some free blacks, some slaves, building the earthworks around Mobile and Spanish Fort and that area. And when the Yankees attacked, they came to Richard Taylor and begged him, give us rifles. And he said, really? He said, we built these earthworks. We wish to defend these earthworks. So that shows you where their heart was. One of my other favorite quotes that Richard Taylor worked about, he's one of them that was a slave said, you know, yeah, well, we don't like the conditions we're in now, but we know who we're dealing with. We would rather deal with our white folks than those white Yankees. Notice the interesting phrasing, our white folks. So there was that idea of, even though it was an imbalanced community, it was still a community. We have communities now that are imbalanced. You know, I'm not near as wealthy or as young or as good looking as you are. So, you know, that's not real balanced there.
Wealthy?
Dude, I'm a retired public school teacher.
I'm a broke college student, man. I think we about even.
Oh, no. You're a water dog entrepreneur. I know there's a lot of money in that, right? Yeah.
I ain't getting it.
Yeah, there's a lot of money in it, and you're putting it in it.
Amen.
Yeah, Japan. Yeah, you got to have logistics, Ron. If you got to have somebody bringing you ammo, or you're not going to have any ammo. You got to have somebody bringing you food. You got to have medical care. You can't just have the warrior up front. Yeah, it was also used during. It may even be used now. You know, our white folks, our folks, these folks, kin. You know, my dad grew up really poor in Bienville Parish, Louisiana, which is kind of northwest Louisiana for those that don't know. And he used to tell me that his dad worked with black folks. This was in the 30s and 40s, and they would come to their house and they would go to their house because he said poor. Their phrase was poor don't know a color. So everybody in that country community, we're all looking out for one another at that time. So, you know, that's kind of how what he passed on to me. There was another one. I don't remember who said this. It may have been like Maynard Jackson or somebody. He said, it doesn't matter what boat we came. It doesn't matter what kind of ship we came on. We're all in the same boat now. I like that one too. So, yeah. So there was that story with Richard Taylor and Mobile and Harper's. Now, was mentioned earlier about Forrest's escort. Well, this gets me on another topic and a very, one time even more famous SEV member who's gotten older and not around as much. Yeah, Ron, you might remember, this gets into the guy I'm fixing to talk about, though, a song by the Rebel Airs that said, black is just a darker shade of gray. And that gets us to the guy I'm talking about now, Nelson Wimbush. Mr. Wimbush was a member of the SEV for as long as I can remember. I never heard of him passing away. And if he didn't, he's like 94. He was born in 1929. He was a professional educator, and he is the grandson, I believe it was grandson, yes, of Louis Napoleon Nelson. Let me tell you about Louis Napoleon Nelson. You can find his picture. There he is right there. That's where he was at one of the UCV reunions. He was originally a cook or whatever. He ended up in Forrest's guard. And according to Mr. Wimbush, and there is historical records to back this up, he became a chaplain in that corps and would have been the first black chaplain probably in any American armed forces. And now there's a Wikipedia page for Mr. Nelson, but people have screwed it up. There's a bunch of garbage on there now that's anti-Confederate, blah, blah, blah. But it used to be really good. And one picture they used to have on there, which you might can find on Google, it's a picture of the veteran Nelson at a UCV reunion with his grandson with him. And there's Nelson Winbush at 5 years old wearing a little uniform, standing with his grandfather in his Confederate uniform at a UCV reunion. If you search Nelson and you look at Google Images, you would find that picture. It used to be on his wiki page. Yeah, there he is. So there's Louis Napoleon Nelson at a UCV reunion, and that's Nelson Winbush with him there at 5 years old at the reunion with him. And Ron, I know and Paul and all y'all know Mr. Winbush really well. He's originally from Tennessee, spent his life in education, teacher, assistant principal, and then he retired down in Kissimmee, Florida. Like I said, I haven't heard if he's still around. I hope so. And I know that y'all showed before a video he did called Behind the Stars and Bars, I think was the name of it, where he talks about his ancestor service. And I know from the hours that I've spent talking to Mr. Winbush, he remembers his grandfather's funeral, where he was buried with full Confederate honors. And Mr. Nelson still has the Confederate battle flag that covered his grandfather's casket at his funeral. In fact, I don't know whatever's going to happen to that, but boy, that would be a great thing to have at the Confederate Museum.
Amen.
Because I know that one of the camp commanders down there, I'm going to make it my mission now to find out what's going on down there. Yes, Ron, the Alabama had a lot of black, and also, this will blow your mind. We have an SCV camp in Honolulu, and it's called the Joseph Kanaka Camp, CSN. When the CSS Shenandoah made port in Honolulu during the war, 16 Native Hawaiians signed on the crew. So there were Native Hawaiian Confederate veterans.
Wow. Didn't even know that.
Yeah. And also, as far as Asians, the famous Siamese twins, Ing and Ang, both their sons served in the Confederate Army from North Carolina.
Wow.
I think they had adopted the American name Brown or something. Somebody from North Carolina can tell me that. So, yeah, there's just thousands of these stories out there of black men who may have been so-called forced to go, but chose to stay, or weren't necessarily all that forced to go. Their station in life was just that of a slave or a servant at the time. But you had free black men of color who also volunteered and served all over the war. And there are a lot of them that they're unheralded. For example, at a battle like the Battle of Mansfield and the Red River Campaign, since the Yankees were coming, it wasn't just the official Confederate troops. People from all over the countryside grabbed their squirrel rifles and their shotguns and everything and started shooting the Yankees. I'm sure there was a lot of them. In fact, one of the plantations down below Natchitoches, Louisiana, called Melrose, was owned by a free black woman, Mary Therese Quanquan. And she had free blacks that worked for her there, and she had quite a few slaves. And one of the more famous families from that area is, we always said Metiwar. Nowadays they call it Matoyer. And good point, Paul. No one forced them to go to reunions, and no one forced them to be accepted either, like they were accepted so well at reunions. They were housed. In fact, I'll get back to that. So there were a lot of those black free Confederates from the Natchitoches area that served too. Now, when you talk about the reunions, the big one at Gettysburg, what was it, the 135th or whatever?
I think so.
Well, the UCV gets there, and the Yankee government host had set up camps for white Confederates only, did not take into account the black Confederates. And the white Confederate veterans raised so much hell about it that they brought the black Confederates who were there into their own tents and shared their space with them during the reunion. I don't know if you've heard that story before. Look it up.
I haven't.
I'm
That's
not
phenomenal.
making it up. So they actually integrated their camp at the reunion just like they had done during the war when you had them as various roles that they were doing. Well, I don't have it right now, Ron. But I know you want to put it in a book, and I'll see what I can find on it.
I was about to say, I'll put it in a book. I'll put it in a post. I'll do whatever you want me to do with it. Get me the citation too.
Yeah. But anyway, the point was they were treated well by the Confederates at reunions. Oh, it was at the 75th, Sean? Okay, well, maybe Sean knows the citation for that out there if he's familiar with the story.
Please send it in if you have it.
The 75th was at Gettysburg, so there you go. It was in what, 19, I don't remember the year. I'm not that good at math. 1913 or something like that. So, yeah. So there you go. Yeah, I was going to mention, let's see, who wrote that down? Jason. Yeah, there's two books. There's several books. Irvin George wrote a book on black Confederates. It's mostly, if I remember right, mostly is on the Virginia area. There was another one about black Confederates, Professor Edwin Smith, and he actually spoke at our convention one year about his stories on black Confederates. You also have two books that were partially edited by past Commander-in-Chief Kelly Barrow. I think one's called Confederates in Gray, Blacks in Gray, or one's called Forgotten Confederates, but those two are out there too, where they have pictures. And that may have been where I read some of that in one of those books. You know, when you get my age, you can't necessarily remember where you read all this stuff. But I promise you, I'm not just making it up. So that's the whole reunion thing, as far as how they were accepted. And one of the great stories that's about how they were accepted after the war gets me to one of our local stories. At the beginning of the war, from DeSoto Parish, went off, I believe it was in the 2nd Louisiana Infantry. He turned him his body servant, a young man by the name of Levi Carnine. And he went off with his so-called master, and his master, so-called, who they were raised together, by the way, was killed. Well, he collected all the man's effects, removed his body from the field, had him buried in a decent grave, and had his effects sent home, but chose to stay with the regiment and signed on to serve the new commander. He could have easily hopped the fence or the trench or whatever you want to call it and been gone. He was out there on the battlefield by himself with the Yankees on the other side. The only thing he was concerned with was retrieving his friend's body from the battlefield so it wouldn't lay out there for the pigs and the buzzards. So later in the war, that guy also was killed, and he did the same thing. After Vicksburg fell, the men up in the Louisiana units from Virginia were cut off. They didn't know what was going on, if their families were safe back home or what was going on, or they couldn't send word to themselves. So they needed a volunteer to sneak all the way back to Louisiana through all the battle lines. And Levi Carnine took that challenge. I want you to imagine this. We're talking about a black man traveling alone through the middle of the war of Yankee aggression. Okay. Much as I hate to say it, it's true. He could have easily have been grabbed by Confederate troops and taken as a servant. He could have easily have been grabbed by Union troops and forced into service. I mean, that's a whole nother story we could do about a lot of these so-called colored troops were forced. In fact, the Yankees had gangs that would go around impressing black people and would get a bounty for everyone they could deliver to the camps to have a rifle stuck in their hands. They weren't all free volunteers in the Union armies either. So anyway, he made his way all through Confederate and Union lines, got across the river, and made it back to DeSoto Parish, with letters and news from all these people's loved ones. You can imagine what esteem he was held in after that. In fact, when he died, the living Confederate veterans not only gave him a burial with full Confederate honors, they buried him in a Confederate cemetery. The place he's buried is in the Mansfield Cemetery, where the dead from the Battle of Mansfield were buried, many of them with unknown markers. And the veterans themselves chose to bury him amongst the other Confederate dead. Okay, so he had his marker later got broken, and then us in the Louisiana Division got him this official marker here and placed on his grave in the Mansfield Cemetery. And then a few years ago, when HK did his march across Dixie all the way to Austin, coming through Mansfield, we took him, and I was there. I may have taken this picture. I was there with him on this part of the journey where he stopped and paid respects at Levi Carnine's grave as a, I don't know how much more of a black Confederate you can be if the Confederate veterans themselves bury you amongst the Confederate dead with full Confederate honors. I don't know how you argue against that. It also shows you what the veterans thought about their black Confederate veterans as well. So
I think the problem is you can't argue with it, hence why they would rather erase it and act like it didn't happen.
Right. You going to tell those Confederate veterans who buried Levi Carnine there that he was not one of their brothers in arms? No. They would take a cane to your head and whoop you up one side the other. Worse than your grandmama with a garden hoe, I'm telling you.
Oh, so, yeah. It would have been it would have been interesting if they tried to pull this back when they were alive. And now, I mean, there might even be stories from back when they were alive when they were trying to deny it. But now it's full blown, you know, it's a lie. That never happened. They were, you know, and if they do admit it, they will always they were forced into it. They really didn't care. They didn't want to fight for the South, but they were forced to. And, you know, they were too scared to do anything else about it. But I think we've given enough proof they had times to run.
Also, why wasn't there a rebellion back at home while the men were gone?
Yes. Wouldn't that make more sense? And not only that, but if you gave these people weapons, if you gave them weapons and you're and they're in camp with you sleeping, wouldn't that be a perfect opportunity for a rebellion? Even if there was only
just to go.
Yeah, even if there was just a handful, you have guns to survive. You could get to the safe haven up north and you wouldn't have to ever worry about it again. But they stayed and fought with honor because they loved the South and they loved their Southern brethren. And I think why, like what you said earlier, you know, they were like, we don't like the conditions, but we know these people and we'll
work this out.
Yeah, we'll work this out. I think they had the solution that, you know, they will fix their own communities, get their freedom and get their rights. I think that was their mentality in a time where there was the start, I would say, maybe not the start, but, you know, the definition of, you know, the white versus black.
In the early 1800s, some of the largest anti-slavery groups were in the South. Mm-hmm. But being kind of hot-blooded, once people started telling us, you got to do this and you got to do that, a lot of people got, plus with the invention of the cotton gin and all that, and increased the labor needs and things like that. But even Jefferson Davis believed in the eventual freedom. In fact, he was preparing his slaves for freedom by teaching them, you know, having school for them. When he left to go to be the Confederate president, he left one of his black slaves in charge of his plantation. In fact, eventually willed it to him, you know, up there at Briarwood in that area. And Ron mentioned one of your other Mississippi guys, Holt Collier. Mm-hmm. Not only was he Confederate during the war, he was a Confederate after the war.
I love his story.
He was very unreconstructed. In fact, a whole nother topic here, but there's good reason to believe that he was involved with the Knights of the Golden Circle, which was a group after the war that one of the reasons that they were robbing and stealing was to build up a treasury to fund the refounding and of hostilities to reestablish the Confederacy.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, Jesse James and all that were all part. Get you a book called Rebel Gold,
Mm-hmm.
and the area of North Louisiana, Arkansas, East Texas, and Oklahoma is supposedly where they hid it all. And there's some really interesting stories about some areas, and two of their symbols were an axe head and a turtle. And I've seen in North Louisiana gravestones with an axe head carved into the back of them, and that would mean somebody was in the Knights of the Golden Circle.
Well,
Polk Carter was involved with some of that stuff too.
In Mississippi,
he shot a white Yankee officer, and the local white folks found him not guilty after the war.
That's fantastic. You know, the monument we have to at the old Capitol, but of course then the Capitol in Mississippi, the monument to Confederate veterans. You know, the person that really got that through and shelled a very powerful speech in honor of the veterans was a black senator at the time. He wanted to honor all of the Confederate veterans who served. And again, why do that if there was this just level of hate, this level of we don't want y'all here? There's just pure hatred. And if they didn't serve, again, why would they want it? And it starts begging the question that, the historians of today have tried to deny. Why do all this? And they keep having to make up reasons why these, African Americans, these black men were fighting for Confederate rights. Why were they doing that? And they keep making up these reasons.
Their home also.
Yes. And
now, one of my favorite stories, and this is completely apocryphal, so don't ask me for citation, but I just love it. I think I may have read it in one of the Kennedy books, maybe not, where they have all these Confederates captured and they got them in a stockade. And the master swallows the dog. He takes the oath and they let him out. And they keep saying to his servant, he says, well, what? Your master took the oath. Why won't you? And he said, master got no principles.
That's hilarious. Ron also corrected me, and I probably have it saved somewhere, but I didn't know it from memory. But that black legislator was a veteran himself, again, fighting for his own monument. And that's why in Mississippi, we are just, so proud of our veterans and of that monument because of the history behind it. We had to fight for it. And this man really won that battle for us, a Confederate veteran, a black Confederate veteran.
Like I said, I'm not an expert on this, and I knew this much about it. Imagine how much there is actually out there that has been uncovered and hasn't been uncovered yet. All these, I'll give you another one. This, and I'll have to say, the reason I know about this is past Louisiana Division Commander David Hill, who's also the chairman of the Graves Committee now. This is who I got this from. Just over the line from Shreveport, below Caddo Lake, there's a little town called Karnak, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you had a family there, name was the Taylors. There was a black Confederate from that area. He has a Confederate headstone in a black cemetery outside of Karnak, Texas. Now, here's why that's even more interesting. His daughter served as a nanny nurse for one of the local rich families, their young daughter of the Taylor family, who grew up to marry a Texas state senator by the name of Lyndon Baines Johnson. Lady Bird Johnson's nurse, his father, was a black Confederate soldier. How about that?
That's awesome. And there, as past Commander-in-Chief Michael said, there's so many of these stories we've either not uncovered yet or haven't even scratched the surface tonight. Tonight we talked about, we went into that with two men. We've told a lot of stories that we know of about other men, like that legislator. Thank you, Dr. Mitchum, John F. Harris. We've touched on it. There's so much again, and it's so sad that again that these, and I always use quotation marks because they haven't earned the title of historian. These historians want to wipe them away, and to that the SCV and SCV chat says, not on our watch. We will make sure that everybody who wore the gray, no matter of race, religion, differences, or what have you, will be honored and respected and remembered as long as we are here. And we hope that again that you join us in this effort. Share this episode out. Let's make this a big one. Let's show some people some history, because I heard a lot of stories tonight I didn't know. I didn't know the story from Chuck with Mr. What was his rank?
Levi
yeah,
Carnine?
Yeah.
I'm guessing just
Private.
high private.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I like to give them, they've earned it, to go by that title. So I try my best to go. But yeah, him. There's so many other stories I didn't know about tonight, and I'm someone who has been trying to research this topic. So that tells you how deep it is. And I love that quote. And we actually posted that quote last year on Facebook, and we'll probably post it again sometime this week. Black is just a darker shade of gray, and there's nothing more true. These men were our brothers. They were a part of our society. And after the war, we all became a step level closer that they weren't that close in the North. They had riots in the North because of this. Abraham Lincoln, as Chuck already said, wanted to ship every black person off the continent. And down here, you having us share tents during reunions, stuff that they would not allow in Northern cultures without the South fighting for it.
One comment, CW mentioned here, that movie 80 Acres of Hell. Yeah, that's an excellent thing to watch. It also brings to mind, go back and watch Ride with the Devil, where they had the black guerrillas in with the Missouri guerrillas on Ride with the Devil as well too, which is accurate. Best movie Tobey Maguire ever made.
There's no doubt there. But everybody, if you could please thank
Thanks, Ron.
Past Commander-in-Chief Chuck McMichael for coming on and giving us this presentation tonight and telling us these stories and making sure that they're remembered for time. This episode will forever be up, and even if they try to take it down, we'll put it right back up. So this is just one of them episodes where you shine the light. I think Dr. Mitchum said it. There's so many privates. There's so many men in this war that we haven't heard their story, and they have great stories. And tonight we heard them. So again, everybody, please thank Past Commander-in-Chief Chuck Michael for coming on and telling these stories. Share this episode out. Let's make sure we get some good numbers for these men. And comment. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you haven't started following, follow. And if you haven't been to scvchat.com, why don't you check that out? Real quick, make sure to tune in this Thursday for Look Around the Confederation. Please send in your news. I know a lot of you are sending in your news because I am just swimming in it now. And so we're going to have a lot to talk about this Thursday, as well as make sure to tune in tomorrow for Look Around Florida. On Look Around Florida's page. I think David will have a Friday night live in the Friends group, so please check that out. Yes, he says it right there. We'll be live Friday night in the Friends group, so go check that out. All great content. And, of course, Michael Hardy has a live show on Sundays. Check that out. I don't think he had it this week, so he should have something great planned this Sunday. I'm going to put him on the spot. Chuck, Yeah, Chuck does have a birthday coming up. Took me a second there.
Who?
You.
Yeah, less than a month.
Yeah. We'll make a post. I'll send him confetti. It'll explode. I'll see if I have that in the budget, and we'll have like a hidden camera crew there.
Actually, I have 2 important dates coming up the first weekend of March.
Anniversary being the second?
It'll be 1 year cancer free.
Oh, yeah. Congratulations. Amen to that. That is
I had
truly
surgery
a blessing.
March the 8th. So
Well, definitely congratulations. Glad you're still with us, so I can bother you some more. Because I mean, what would life be without me bothering Chuck? I don't know if I would want to live there, but thank
you're
you all.
going to have to someday.
Someday, but not today. But
I hope that nothing tragic happens to you.
Well, let me find some wood to knock on. Chuck is going to get me hit
I
driving
got quite
home
a few
tonight.
years on you here.
Just 1 or 2. I mean, we're real close.
Mm.
Just a smidge and a half. But thank you for coming on, past Commander in Chief Chuck Michael. And again, tune in Thursday. We'll see y'all then. And I think that's everything I need to promote. I hope so. If not, oops, that's on me. But I'll see you Thursday if not. And remember, in the words of the late, great Harold Philpott, no fumar in the elevator. Good night, everybody.
Adios.